Hi, I'm Lizzie.
And I'm Brenda.
And welcome back to
Small Step Society.
This is Season 2, Episode 13, Emotional Intelligence.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hey!
Hi, welcome back.
Today we have another great episode planned, this time once again based off another quote.
Yes.
So, it goes, "It takes something more than intelligence to act intelligently." From Fyodor Dostoevsky.
Mm-hmm.
But the real question is, what is that something more?
Yes. Spoiler alert. It's the title of this episode.
True. But, in case you wanted to learn more, you gotta stick around after our song of the moment. What's your song of the moment?
My song of the moment is called Lost Stars by Adam Levine.
Oh.
It's also, I think, from the movie called Begin Again. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Nice. Adam Levine. What a star.
Yes. How about you? What's your song of the moment?
People always change by tiny habits.
Nice. I've never heard of it, but it
It's
sounds
a good
great.
song.
Nice.
So, emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
This term was actually first coined by psychologists Peter Salovey and John D. Mayer. And it's defined as one's capacity to perceive, process, and regulate emotional information accurately and effectively both within oneself and in others, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and actions and to influence those of others.
Wow.
A very long definition.
Yes.
But this basically just means that it refers to someone's ability to read what's going on in the room, whether it be within themselves or others, and then respond appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
And this is colloquially referred to as EQ,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of to play in contrast with IQ, which we probably all have heard about, which is intelligence quotient, or basically a measure of your intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So EQ is like the measure of your emotional intelligence. So psychologist Daniel Goleman, who I think we're going to talk a bit more about in this episode actually, he popularized the idea of emotional intelligence, and he actually told Harvard Business Review, "The most effective leaders are all alike in one crucial way. They all have a high degree of what has come to be known as emotional intelligence. It's not that IQ and technical skills are irrelevant. They do matter, but they are the entry-level requirements for executive positions."
Mm-hmm.
So kind of drawing from that, I personally think of IQ as more of a static characteristic where you can't really change it. You're kind of born with it.
Mm-hmm.
But with EQ, you have more of the room to grow and improve constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what Goleman is saying with that quote in the workplace is IQ can only take you so far. You need to grow and develop as an individual emotionally for you to kind of succeed in executive positions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And kind of adding on, I feel like even if you're not the most like quote unquote qualified person for the position, whether it be like experience, education, or other criterias, I think the candidates who possess a higher like EQ or emotional intelligence tend to be better leaders and like a better fit for the position, and they tend to be selected for the position, I think.
Right.
Which just goes back to Goleman's quote.
Yeah, it's kind of like IQ is like the hard skills people talk about, and EQ is the soft skills. But more on that later.
Yes. So there are 5 categories of emotional intelligence that Goleman defined, and it's also called the mixed model. The first category being self-regulation, and this refers to the ability to manage one's negative or disruptive emotions and to adapt to change in circumstances. And this helps to manage conflict and adapt to change. So people who are skilled in self-regulation are more likely to take responsibility, and honestly, like this part is very hard because emotions aren't something that you can just like take off easily. They're not like a pair of shoes where like you like leave it out and then you can put them back on.
Right.
So self-regulation is super important, but also super hard to learn and like to improve on.
Yeah, I feel like people talk a lot about compartmentalizing their emotions, where they're able to like put it in a parking lot in their brain and then like take it back out. But that is a very hard skill to hone, I feel like.
It is, yeah. And the second category he defines as motivation. So the ability to self-motivate with a focus on achieving internal or self-gratification as opposed to external praise or reward. So intrinsic motivation, which we talked about a little bit during our season 1. But he says that people who can motivate themselves tend to be more committed and goal-focused, which makes sense because it's not an external factor that can change. It just comes from within you.
Yeah.
The third category is empathy, which is the ability to recognize and understand how others are feeling and consider those feelings before responding in social situations. And this one aligns the most, I think, with the definition that Solovey and Meyer gave for the word emotional intelligence. But also a little shout out to our first ever Small Step Society episode, Embodying Empathy.
True.
So if you want to learn more. The next category is social skills. So this refers to the ability to manage the emotions of others through emotional understanding and using this to build rapport and connect with people. And the last one is self-awareness, which is the ability to recognize and understand your own emotions and their impact on others.
Yeah. Tasha Urish actually found that 95% of people think they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% actually are.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a common kind of theme within humans, is that we always think we're doing something a lot better than we actually are.
Yeah.
So in terms of introspection, it's a great place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like talking about those 5 categories in the mixed model sets a great stage for the rest of the scenarios of emotional intelligence we're going to talk about, and how each of those different aspects can play into developing your emotional intelligence. So one of those first situations is, in fact, the workplace. So 71% of employers value emotional intelligence more than technical skills when evaluating candidates. So like I said before, this is kind of your soft skills. And so when you have low to no emotional intelligence, it can be really detrimental, especially in the workplace, because you'll find yourself in many conflicts and misunderstandings, and it's a different atmosphere than your personal life, where you can easily just address what's going on and explain yourself in a more personal way. But in the workplace, you have to tiptoe around situations a little more. And so when you're finding yourself in conflicts, it can be a little more challenging.
And I think, kind of throwing back to the guest episode, Kevin Thompson talked about how if he saw a GPA on the resume, he'd actually put it in the bottom of the stack because he wants to know where your energy comes from, right? And I think that ties into like the emotional intelligence and like how you cultivate your energy and your emotional abilities, right, and well-being.
Yeah, research has actually shown that people with high emotional intelligence can earn an average of up to $29,000 more annually than those who score low on emotional intelligence. That's a crazy number, 29,000.
Yeah.
Warren G. Bennis said that emotional intelligence, more than any other factor, more than IQ or expertise, accounts for 85 to 90% of success at work. He says that IQ is a threshold competence. You need it, but it doesn't make you a star. Emotional intelligence can.
Oh.
So diving a little more into that, I would kind of break this down depending on like the level in a company that you're at. So on a manager or a leadership level, emotional intelligence helps you understand how best to support your employees, because a huge part of your job is just making sure that the people that work under you are working in a positive environment and that they're given the tools that they need to succeed. So questions that you should be asking if you're emotionally intelligent in that position are like, what motivates your peers to work? What motivates the people working for you to work? What energizes them, like you mentioned? How can you support their energies in a way that's fulfilling to them, but also ultimately, because it is your job, fulfilling to the value or the goals of your business?
Yeah. And I think Lauren mentioned a lot of this during the guest episode too.
Yeah. I know, it's all interrelated. But on a teamwork level, so looking at lower levels, really just anywhere where you need to collaborate, emotional intelligence is incredibly important because it helps you connect with others better, and it also boosts those collaborative efforts. Like you talked about in the mixed model, you need to understand why others are thinking the way they do, part of empathy. And you need to know how to respond. You need to be open to sharing ideas, but also you need to be open to listening to others' ideas. It's a two-way street, and if you're only focusing on one part of that, you're not really going to be emotionally intelligent in a way that's effective to the team.
Right.
Yeah. I think effective management of emotions as well can include not having outbursts, not taking out your anger on an innocent person, which is why I think like a lot of schools nowadays start that collaborative effort, start that team building from a very young age, because these are skills that it takes a long time to develop, and especially in your younger years when you're kind of growing as a person, it's good to practice all of these things where you're not throwing tantrums, essentially.
Yeah, for sure.
The final piece of this little work puzzle is, I think, the personal work level. So personally, higher emotional intelligence, like we mentioned, is linked to job success, but also job satisfaction. It promotes higher self-esteem, positive moods, and you have less of a likelihood of experiencing emotional burnout because you're able to manage your emotions in a healthy manner. So like we talked about with compartmentalizing and being able to regulate your emotions, that's incredibly important in the workplace when you are working with other people and there's a conflict that you need to, set aside your emotions and deal with. Or even like we've all been in that scenario where we're in a group with people that we don't necessarily like as individuals, but we have to work with them, or we maybe don't see eye to eye on issues, but we had to work with them. And so being able to put your emotions that are associated with that person aside is incredibly important. And so when you're able to do that healthily, you're less likely to experience burnout.
Yeah.
And then also with self-awareness, like you mentioned in the mixed model, it's important to know your strengths and weaknesses because that is very important to managing your work effectively, which also leads to less burnout.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we talked about the importance of EQ in the workplace, but also we mentioned how important it is to start learning these skills and training them at a young age. So how do you raise your EQ?
Well, I think the first step to that is distinguishing between the characteristics of people with high EQs and people with lower EQs. So people with higher EQs are able to read facial expressions, body language, all of those different, physical and social characteristics that make up a conversation. They're able to read those better of their conversational partners, and then they are also able to respond effectively. Because it's one thing to notice, okay, you're nodding your head at me, what does that mean? But then to reciprocate that energy is also incredibly important, because if you're nodding your head at me and you're clearly engaged in the conversation, then I'm looking over to this side and not paying attention. That's not a great conversation, and that doesn't show high emotional intelligence. But people with low EQs tend to lack these characteristics, obviously, but they also tend to lack introspection, which also has two components. One, parsing through and dealing with your emotions, and then two, understanding the feelings of others. Yeah. People with low EQs, I think, tend to be constantly at odds with others because they aren't looking for answers within themselves. They're only looking to blame, whatever's going on with other people for why they're experiencing that conflict. And if you're only doing that and you're not looking within yourself, you're never going to reach a common ground with some other person because there's always that barrier that's put up in between you, which is that low emotional intelligence. And keep in mind, that can obviously be something that's happening with both parties, which makes it especially hard to find that common ground. Additionally, people with low EQs may have trouble with feeling empathy. And then also, they may not know their emotional triggers and how to respond to them appropriately.
Yeah, relating to not knowing their emotional triggers, Dr. Emma Seppala from Stanford University mentioned about how not having self-awareness or the ability to be conscious of what is happening in your mind can cause impulsive behaviors, which I think stems from the emotional triggers.
Yeah.
So in order to kind of combat that, she recommends boosting your self-awareness, which is one of the categories from the mixed model. And she says take these 3 exercises to boost your self-awareness. And the first one is noticing the state of your body. So on a spectrum from very tired to very energized, where are you? Do a little scan of your body. Are you hungry? Are you tense? Which part of your body is tense?
Right.
Just kind of take note on what's going on in your body. And then the second one is taking note of your thoughts and their traffic level. So thoughts go in and out of your brain, right? It's like a road. So what is your thought traffic like today? Is it like a super busy highway, or is it just a very calm country road, right? And this one, while I was doing research, I remembered a scenario of this. I was calling my mom, and I told her I was having a hard time learning the material for my exams, and I just was like, oh, I must be tired. The material must be hard. I was just having a slow time understanding. And she was like, do you have other thoughts that's just clouding your brain, like just taking up brain space? And I was like, no. I mean, I never thought about it that way.
Right.
But like, I think I did, right? And it was just the thought traffic. Like it was jamming, like there was a traffic jam, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the last one is notice your emotions. So this is a spectrum of pleasant to unpleasant and intensity. And she says, after all these scans, you can get a quick assessment of your internal thought traffic and stress levels, and this can help you make better decisions for the next course of action.
Yeah.
So boosting self-awareness helps you know your emotional triggers and also kind of mediate the impulsive behavior.
Yeah, I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Like, the whole concept of just noticing makes a lot of sense, because I feel like we've all been in that situation where, like, you hear about something and then suddenly you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think in the same way, like, once you notice something going on within you or going on within your environment, you're suddenly able to actually see it, you know, in a way that matters.
Yeah. And I want to give a little shout out to Inside Out, the movie, because I think it's a great way to teach emotional intelligence to children and to adults, because by making the emotions into characters, it's easier for us to visualize and identify when we're feeling them. So I think this movie is like a way to boost your emotional intelligence, especially because in the first one, they talk about embracing all the emotions and how to regulate strong feelings of one, because there can be a mix of emotions, right? And then the second movie, they show how emotions play a role in society and social skills, especially during puberty too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes, great job, Inside Out.
Yeah, I know. I like the whole use of characters is kind of, it's good. It's really nerdy, but it reminds me of in Harry Potter when they say, like, fear of a name is fear of the thing itself. I feel like in the same way, giving names to your emotions, because in the movie they very clearly categorize emotions, suddenly makes you able to, like, see them and feel them better, which makes you once again able to notice them and then you know, figure out what's going on.
For sure.
To touch on our point about how higher emotional intelligence often means that you're able to read people better, I wanted to talk about how it's important to become an active listener, not an active talker. So research actually shows that poor listening habits and skills affect more than 70% of all employees, resulting in misunderstandings, errors, missed opportunities, arguments, stalled projects, and damaged relationships. This is a little bit of a side tangent, but it reminds me in my linguistics class the other day, we were talking about how, because of societal norms and just the way people grow up, men tend to be very, like, very quiet in conversations when they're talking with women, and like they'll do less of the ums and nods and like asking questions, whereas women are way more likely to probe when they're in a conversation, which is why, like, a lot of the times, like, men and women will kind of have conflicts in the way they're talking or arguing, especially in relationships. Yeah, because it's just like a social kind of piece of conversation that is very gendered.
That's interesting.
So that's another way that listening and talking affects relationships. But anyway.
Actually, a USC article said that active listeners are not only paying attention to the content of a conversation, but also the other person's intent and the underlying emotions expressed. They listen for what's not being said, and they know that how a person expresses themselves can tell you as much as what they say.
Yeah. A huge part, also from my linguistics class, a huge part of linguistics or communication is not just what is being said, but there's these things called paralinguistics, which is everything I've been doing with my hands, or, you know, all that.
The body language.
There's also prosody, which is like the melody of how you're speaking. So, like, for example, that's why, it's also a little bit of a side tangent, but that's why, like, Siri or whatever voice assistants, they have no prosody, so it's very monotone, which makes it hard to listen to, which is why, like, if someone were to talk to you like that, you would feel like they have no emotions.
You'd be a little taken aback.
Yeah, which goes to show that if you are hearing, like, the melody of a person or the way you're emphasizing certain words, that can tell you a lot about the emotion of a sentence or whatever is going on in the communication.
Wow. Linguistics is so cool.
It really is. Jack Zenger and Joseph Folkman said that good listeners are like trampolines. They're someone you can bounce ideas off of, and rather than absorbing your ideas and energy, they amplify, energize, and clarify your thinking. They make you feel better, not merely passively absorbing, but by actively supporting. If you're in a conversation with someone who is, they're listening to you, like they're not interrupting you or anything, but they like don't react to anything you're saying, you are not going to feel supported.
Right.
Like that's why people always say they want someone that can match their energy.
Yes. To add on to the concept of active listeners being good energy trampolines, Dr. Emma Seppala mentions being a positive energizer. And a positive energizer is someone who is very highly emotionally intelligent, who understands the importance of micro moments of upliftment. So being able to connect with others in a positive way by finding small moments to uplift others, I think like helps with the energy matching, and it shows that you're actively listening in that conversation too. And kind of going off of that little attitude portion of being a positive energizer, gratitude also strengthens emotional intelligence, because we talked about gratitude in a previous episode, but practicing gratitude creates a heightened awareness of your emotions, values, strengths, and a greater understanding of others. And in turn, it helps you to reflect on your feelings, emotions, and motivators, and also to perceive the feelings, emotions, and motivators of others.
Yeah.
Because gratitude helps shift the brain's negativity into what's going well in our lives. And this can be a form of self-regulation too, where you recognize unhealthy emotions and can reframe your thoughts.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of perspective on everything.
Yeah.
There's this concept of highly sensitive people, and it was coined by psychologists in the 1990s to describe someone with a deep sensitivity to the physical, emotional, or social situations and information around them. Highly sensitive people, I think, are a great illustration of kind of a couple different extremes of emotional intelligence. And I just want to shout out the book, The Highly Sensitive Person, How to Thrive When the World Overwhelms You by Elaine Aron. I think it's a great look at the life of a highly sensitive person, because I think people who are highly sensitive get a bad rep a lot of the times, and it just gives a great outlook into what they're going through and how their brains work. But anyway, highly sensitive people are incredibly empathetic, but like we kind of touched on in season 1, episode 1, embodying empathy, that can also cause compassion fatigue.
Yes.
So when you take on the feelings of others to a point where it becomes mentally burdensome for yourself. And HSPs, highly sensitive people, score very highly on empathy and self-awareness, but they don't do as well in self-management. The emotionality of it all clouds the brain because they're experiencing compassion and fatigue. They're experiencing the emotions of themselves to a higher degree, and also the emotions of everyone else to a higher degree. So it's just clouding their brain and making it very hard to deal with it. And a lot of the times they are not able to deal with it, which is why it leads to that kind of imbalance of sensitivity. But I thought this was an important reminder that as Anthony St. Martin says, highly sensitive people are too often perceived as weaklings or damaged goods. To feel intensely is not a symptom of weakness. It is a trademark of the truly alive and compassionate. It is not the empath that is broken. Those who are at times described as being a hot mess or having too many issues are the very fabric of what keeps the dream alive for a more caring, humane world. Never be ashamed to let your tears shine a light in this world. I thought that was a great reminder of the importance of being sensitive, and I think that's a huge part of emotional intelligence is being sensitive to your feelings, to the feelings of others, and just being human.
As always, we're going to end our episode with a quote, and this week's quote is from David Caruso, and it goes like this. It is very important to understand that emotional intelligence is not the opposite of intelligence. It is not the triumph of heart over head. It is the unique intersection of both. And with that, as we wrap up this episode, we hope you take something from our conversation today, whether it be active listening, embodying empathy, or getting in touch with your emotions.
Yeah, we'll see you next Sunday because we see you every Sunday. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you can find podcasts except where you can't. You can also watch us on YouTube and follow along with us on Instagram at Small Step Society. And we'll see you next Sunday.
Bye, thanks for listening.
That's one small step for man, giant leap for mankind.